And Angela Ward Hyde is here also. Here we go. Justine, you can start.
Excellent. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Justine Orlando, Chair of the Boston Landmark Commission Design Review Subcommittee. I'm calling to order a meeting of the Boston Landmarks Commission Design Review Subcommittee on April 28th, 2026 at 4 p.m. Present are Commissioners Chair Walker, Commissioner Haney, Commissioner Ward Hyatt, and myself, Orlando. You can participate in this hearing by going to the Zoom meeting link posted in our agenda online at www.zoom.gov.com/J/160701753 or calling 646-828-7666 and entering the meeting ID 1607401-753. You can also submit written comments to us via email at blc@boston.gov. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, including the March 28th, 2025 amendment extending the suspension of these provisions until June 30th, 2027, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations, the Boston Landmarks Commission, to ensure public access to the deliberations of the Boston Landmarks Commission, the public may access this call through telephone or video conferencing. This hearing is also being recorded. All conversations between commissioners should be audible to the public in attendance until the hearing has been adjourned. If there are any media or elected officials present, I would ask that you identify yourself by using the raise your hand function on the Zoom platform and state your name, title, and affiliation. All right. Seeing none here. All right, we will briefly read into the agenda. We have one application for design review, application 26.0829 for the Chestnut Hill Reservoir and Pumping Station in Brighton. Looking to, so this is the proposed work is to replace a portion of the existing Chestnut Hill Reservoir Trail and construct a new stormwater management features to improve drainage, including a new bioretention swale and bioretention rain garden. Looking if someone is present and representing this project, if you could raise your hand and state your name.
I believe Jeffrey Harris from DCR is going to be presenting today. Jeffrey, I've made you a co-host.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And thank you very much. Before you begin your presentation, I'm just going to ask staff to read any staff notes and recommendations into the record.
Okay, that'll be me, Joe Cornish, the Director of Design Review. Staff notes that the Chestnut Hill Reservoir and Pumping Stations are an intact complex of buildings and landscape features that date from 1866 to the 1890s. It was designated a Boston landmark in 1989. The goal of the project is to improve stormwater management and drainage at a portion of the trail around the reservoir. Per the Chestnut Hill Reservoir and Pumping Station standards and criteria under Section 9, landscaping, the general intent is to preserve as much as possible the character of the scenic drive, pastoral setting, and original landforms as originally designed and as later comparatively designed. The development of additional hard surfaced facilities is to be avoided. Maintenance and placement of existing trees and other existing elements should be done in a manner consistent with the site's character. New elements, if any, should be designed to be as unobtrusive as possible. The form of the reservoir and the materials visible above ground lines shall be retained. Any changes to the present appearance shall respect the naturalistic and pastoral character of the original design. Formal plantings on any of the complex's grounds are discouraged. Staff is concerned that the proposed project alters the pastoral setting of the landscape and that the addition of granite curbing adds a formality to the setting that never existed. Therefore, staff recommends continuing the review of this application and that the applicant explore less obtrusive solutions to improve stormwater management and drainage. So Jeffrey, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I will share my screen.
Mhm.
Can everyone see that?
Not yet.
Okay.
On this platform, sometimes, Jeffrey, it's good if you go to the tab that says share a window.
Here we go.
Okay, let's try that.
Yeah.
You know we can see it.
And I'll go to the full. Okay, how's that?
Great.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Yes, my name is Jeffrey Harris. I'm with DCR's Office of Cultural Resources. Also with me today is Tom Valton, who is DCR's Director of Stormwater and Environmental Engineering. And if you could provide him permission, he'll be able to answer some of the questions that you may have about the project. So DCR is proposing a number of sidewalk and drainage improvements along the southwest edge of the Chestnut Hill Reservoir. The reservoir is a man-made basin located within the Chestnut Hill Reservation, which is a public recreational area that's managed by DCR. Today, the reservoir is used by the Metropolitan Water Resource Authority, or MWRA, as an emergency backup drinking water supply. The project includes replacing a portion of the existing Chestnut Hill Reservoir Trail and constructing new stormwater management features. We are doing this to accommodate MWRA requests to eliminate direct sheet flow discharge from the perimeter pathway into the reservoir, which significantly affects water quality. You can see here in these pictures how the stone dust path pitches directly towards the reservoir. The work will also address safety concerns related to the significant grade differences between the asphalt sidewalk along, as you can see here, along the edge of Chestnut Hill driveway in the parkland, and then how it drops off significantly to the stone dust path. These improvements will mitigate the runoff that enters the Chestnut Hill Reservoir and will also help to prevent further erosion and pollution of the surrounding areas. DCR is proposing two different types of drainage systems here. Along the northern portion of the project area across from Boston College, we are proposing to construct a bioretention swale in between the reconstructed paved path and the stone dust path. This yellow line indicates where that swale is proposed to be constructed, again, between the paved path and the stone dust path. The current dimensions of the walkway is a paved path on the outer edge that measures between 5 and 6 feet wide, and the stone dust path, which varies between 12 feet and 14 feet in width. The proposed conditions would be a consistently 6 foot wide paved path on the outer side, a stone dust path that's a consistent 8 feet in width, with a grassy area between the stone dust and the riprap that angles down into the reservoir. And in between the paved path and the stone dust path would be a 2.5 feet wide bioretention swale. And I can show you some more of the details
And
of this
that's the
swale.
continuous
Yes,
structure that keeps
that will be
people from
continuous following
crossing.
the line of that yellow line shown in the aerial here.
So if somebody's on the paved path, they don't get to cross onto the stone dust path, or vice versa. They're separated.
That's correct.
And even slightly different grades, it looks like in your section, maybe in some places.
Yes, I have a closer view of the,
Okay, thanks.
I can show you. Here is kind of an axonometric view of it. That shows some of the details. The swale will consist of granite curbs that will run parallel to the paths with perpendicular granite weirs spaced at about like 30 to 35 feet in between them that will control the stormwater flow within the swale. Inside the swale will be low plantings and vertical drains connecting to drainage pipes below grade. And in the detailed section view, you can see how the paved path will be sloped directly towards this swale, and the stone dust path on the other side will also be directed, sloped at a 2% grade towards the swale, so that all the stormwater will be from the pathways will be going into this central feature. This is a plan view on the top showing how the plantings and these stone drainage features will be positioned at the openings in the weirs. And this bottom section is it's a long section view showing the design of the swale. And we can go back to these details as we get into the discussion. I wanted to show you an example of a similar type structure that was installed at 114 Dudley Street in Roxbury between the bicycle path and the concrete sidewalk. What we are proposing is similar to this, obviously without the tree plantings and without the stone benches that you see here, but the design with the exposed granite curbing, with the openings that through which stormwater will flow into the structure would occur. And the low plantings is somewhat similar to what we'd be proposing here, just to give you a general visual to go on. Also wanted to show you at the northern terminus of the proposed swale, which will be ending here where this granite curb comes into the sidewalk. Just north of where we're proposing the swale is an existing granite curb feature that extends for a length north of the project area. That shows that there is a granite curb element currently there on the landscape that we would essentially be continuing, obviously in a slightly different format, but there is that element that currently exists there.
Jeff, could you speak a little bit about that landscaping right there that serves as a border between that path and the water? Is that intentional landscaping, or is it just things that grew there?
It looks to me that it was originally a grassy swale area that has probably eroded over time.
Actually, on the other side, the water side.
The stone riprap between the reservoir and the stone dust path, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, that is exposed stone that's kind of at a consistent grade that's angled up to the stone dust path.
And the planting above it, is that intentional, or I'm just
I
wondering
believe that
if
there is
herbs.
probably, I think the grass strip was intentionally planted there. I think over time there has been some invasive vegetation growth that's come into that
Okay,
slip riprap. And you can see
gotcha.
that here.
So it's not like that is not doing a job. It's not helping with water conditions.
Correct. That's not part of the intention,
Yeah.
intentional planting of
Okay,
this
sorry, I
historic
didn't notice
landscape.
that when you submitted.
Okay. So that is the proposed design for this swale for the northern section. I'll now show you what we're proposing for the southern portion of the area. This will be what we call a bioretention rain garden. And it will extend from the southern terminus of the granite rain garden and will continue along this section as noted on the yellow line on the aerial. The existing conditions here in this upper photograph are pretty representative of what you see along that whole stretch. We have the elevated Beacon Street on the left with the guardrail with this vegetated slope that extends steeply down to a grass strip, or that's most in the character of a grassy swale of sorts. You would then have the paved path, which varies from 5 to 6 feet in width, and the stone dust path of 12 to 14 feet in width, similar to what we have in the northern section. And what we're proposing to do here is a fairly minimal alteration of this. We'll be introducing a new paved sidewalk, 6 feet in width, a stone dust gravel walkway that's 8 feet in width, which will be then both sloped to the left here, and there we'll be excavating this area a little more intentionally to create a deeper bioretention rain garden to collect the stormwater runoff that's coming from the path and from the slope on the left as well. So this will be only a kind of a minor change to that landscape character. I can show you some more details of this. Here's an axon view again showing you'll be instituting a grassy strip at the edge of the riprap, the stone dust path with a stone diaphragm in between that and the paved path, and then the slope down to the grassy swale with some low plantings inside, and at the bottom of which will be the main drainage pipe that will all drain into. And here's a more detailed view of the section showing the new widths, the slope towards the swale, and some details of the construction of the swale itself. As I mentioned, this will be what we feel as a minimal change to this landscape. These are photographs starting at the northern end of this area, heading south, showing the existing conditions. Again, the existing stone dust path is currently sloped towards the reservoir, and we're looking to change that grade so that it's all heading to this new, deeper swale on the roadside. And again, as you head south, that swale, as it currently exists, gets deeper and deeper and more pronounced. And then we'll be terminating it around at this point here near this opening at Gate B. So that's the essence of what we're proposing. We're happy to provide more information on the stormwater standards that are guiding these improvements and that unfortunately limit some of the design options that are available to us.
All right. Could we possibly go back to one of the kind of the overall shots close for the northern section?
Sure.
Sure. This is a good one. Okay. I think in some of the plans that you had at the very end of maybe a previous presentation, it looked like you started to kind of as-built existing grading that was here. I cannot quite understand the new grading plan versus what we have, specifically more on the north. I think the southern is a little more obvious, but on the north. So have we studied that? Is that information that could be prepared?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding the question. Could you phrase it a little different? I'm not understanding what you're asking. I apologize.
Sure. No worries. So when I look at the detail on the bottom left-hand corner,
Okay.
right, of this screen, and then I'm looking at these images of the existing conditions, right? I think this is a nice visual here. You have your paved pathway and then the stone dust and the 2 feet in between here. However, what is our change in overall grading from where we have our paved path to our new paved path the
I understand what you're saying now. I get it.
versus the stone path,
Right.
existing top of stone path, let's say, to kind of this change in grade at the stone path. So I think that's some information that for me, I think is very important, and I'm not sure that that is well defined. So
I
that's
I
kind of just one
understand.
thing to maybe put on the list there. And it looks very aggressive in the image on the bottom here, I guess is what I'm getting at, right? This is
We can definitely provide those elevation changes and elevations for you. But quickly, just to kind of speak to it a little bit. The asphalt path that is existing and the asphalt path that is depicted in the detail in the bottom left corner, that elevation isn't going to change. So
okay.
consider that, like, think of that as consistent in your head. In the excuse me, in the stone dust path will be slightly lowered on in this picture, left side, to accommodate the resloping of the gravel path to slope it away from the reservoir. So if you want to, Jeffrey, if you want to zoom to the next photo that shows that a little bit bigger picture of the bioretention detail.
This one or the next one?
I think it might be the next one. Yeah. So if you can see in this picture where it says elevation 131.2
Mm-hmm.
on the stone dust path, yeah, right there. So that's the bottom, that's the path elevation. And the top of the granite would be about 14 inches higher. So we're talking about similar to a curb height of a little bit higher than a curb height of exposure. It's about 12 to 14 inches.
Focus of your everything, I think you can make something out of it that.
Okay. Yeah, that feels very very different than what we have there now. With just kind of looking at those changes in elevation and exposure of that granite stone. Commissioner Haney, I think we're getting some background noise. Thank you. Yeah, so I think with how much stone that of the granite rather that is exposing, if you could maybe take another look at that, see if there's a way to soften that anyway.
Sure, we did look at that, but we can look at it again, absolutely. The issue is Jeffrey, if you want to go back to that photo that shows the grade separation between the existing path and the gravel path, there is already a major grade difference. So the stormwater feature is twofold, if you can see it in this full picture here. We need to retain the sidewalk or we'll continue to lose it. So there has to be some type of, slope, treatment along between the elevated path of the asphalt path and the gravel path. And we're trying to minimize that as best we can, but that's almost unavoidable. Trying to when you're fighting two different grade elevations at such a tight, narrow
Mhm.
corridor, it's really your design options get really limited. We could try to minimize that a little more. I understand what you're saying. That curb right there that you're looking at right now, the existing one, that's already about 10 inches. So we're talking about 2 inches higher. And the only reason why it's going to be higher is because the new one, that proposed bioretention swale, is going to have a lip over the existing asphalt of about 2 inches. So that's why it's going to look 2 inches higher, because it's going to be a little higher than the existing asphalt. Well, that one right there that you're looking at in the photo is level with the asphalt already.
Maybe
That
some
makes
material choices
Yeah.
could help maybe soften that up a little bit. We're also now going to be looking at, two harsh lines of definition, right? Where, in the photo, the granite, I believe when we looked at it from another photo, if this is the same spot, kind of took some curves, meandered a little
Mm.
bit versus what I think you're proposing is maybe a little more rigid in placement. Just some thoughts.
Mhm.
I think maybe if there's some ways to look at intentionally softening that would be helpful. Understanding grading in the presentation would be helpful. Also, just a couple quick questions on the actual system itself. What is like overall like the effectiveness and longevity here? Like what is this going to gain us either in terms of years against erosion or um,
Well,
certain types of erosion? Could you speak a little bit of that to that?
yeah, so nothing lasts forever, right? But when we design things, we design them to a 20 or 30 year, um, last at least 20 or 30 years, which this will do. It's just a simple bioretention swale that we'll be maintaining on a biannually basis as part of our NIPD's discharge permit that we have with the agency through the EPA discharge permit. So we'll be inspecting it biannually, maintenance it as needed there because of those inspections, and doing whatever maintenance needs to be done to it to keep it in working order. It is going to. It's not an infiltration bioretention swale. It is a filtration bioretention swale. So what it does, since we're within 50 feet of a reservoir, we can't infiltrate stormwater back into the ground. We can only filter it. So the bioretention soils within the unit filter all the stormwater until it reaches the pipe at the bottom of the structure, and then from that pipe would convey it to the closed, you know, BWSC stormwater system. So it's essentially protecting the reservoir from contaminants that could potentially sheet flow into the reservoir if everything was designed to sheet into the reservoir. This is going to sheet all the water will now sheet into this structure.
Could I ask a clarifying question about that?
Absolutely.
Is this reservoir still used as water supply for anyone?
It's a backup water supply for the city of Boston, but the MWRA considers it. No, they don't consider it a backup. They treat their reservoirs all the same.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
so
didn't think it was
it
anything
is not.
anymore. And maybe that informs my next question a little bit, but what would someone have done better when this was laid out to begin with? Like, are there more natural and maybe a little bit more crude ways to handle things like this instead of introducing all kinds of new materials and very, very technical details, which are beautiful? In other words, I know that there is very good and solid engineering in this, and I appreciate that. But as we're trying to protect a historic site, are there more like, I don't know, blunt instruments that we could be using that are less technical? Because I think the very technical nature of this is making it feel inappropriate, and it's
I wish
hard.
there was.
Yeah.
I wish there was. We're trying to change the profile of the existing pathway. So to go back to your first part of your question, what would they do differently? I don't think they would have put a path around the reservoir, today,
Hmm.
knowing, what they know about drinking water, right? But it's
Sure.
here, and we have to deal with it now, and it's
Yeah.
in an urban setting, so it's a little different than the reservoir that you'd see out in the Quabbin, right? But
Hmm.
but the MWRA's biggest concern is, keeping the drinking water clear and clean of any, TSS, the suspended solids or anything that would get into it. And the path slope the way it is, does that. And we're trying, they've been requesting from us for a long time now to try to minimize that, that point discharge of sheet flow into the reservoir from the path.
Mhm.
And if I may, I think part of the problem with this, the challenge of this northern section is just given the existing conditions,
Yeah.
you know, from this view, to be able to slope everything back towards this triangular park, parkland would be
Mhm.
difficult just given the height of where the edge of this paved path is. And it would require a significant amount of grading that would likely damage the root systems of these mature trees here.
Mhm.
It would be a significant change to
Well, could you
the
raise the
character of this
stone dust
landscape.
path?
Pardon?
Could you raise the stone dust path? I understand lowering the paved path might be a problem.
I see
We
what you're
actually
saying.
looked at that, and it would take about a 16 or 18-inch fill to raise it. And and we're talking about maybe a long way, not just like a 10-foot wide, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet.
Mhm.
And therefore that's unaffordable. What am I to conclude from
Well,
that?
not only affordable, it's not practical.
Okay.
You would need to extend the riprap slope
The ripraps, I mean, it would become
to a certain
extremely
extent, which would
expensive.
then narrow
Yeah.
the path to some extent, I'm
Mhm.
assuming. Um,
But that is the type of thing that I guess I'm trying to
Mm.
get at as well, is there a more, like, again, like a blunt like a blunt instrument that could
Grade the
achieve
path.
this
Yeah. Grade the path
without,
away from the pond.
yeah, yeah. Also, like, of course, we should have talked about this during our staff review, and I apologize for doing it now, but what contaminants can get here, considering the road is far away in some places? I guess it's not far away everywhere. Is that the contaminants are from the road? That's the problem.
Putting the people and dogs and whatever
Okay.
else is using the path.
Yeah. Okay.
It could be, a slew of total suspended solids, E.
Mhm.
coli from, feces that are not, I'm not talking about human feces or anything, but animal feces or
No,
anything.
just
Anything that,
animals. Yeah.
yeah, anything that, ends up on the path after a rainstorm is going to wash into the pond.
Mhm.
Into the reservoir, sorry.
That might be a first for landmarks topics. Um,
Apologize for
Brad,
that.
Brad, any other comments
Cer-
that you'd like to share?
Certainly don't want to be the first for anything.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thank you for all of this work and helping us understand the constraints and the context. I have to say I'm not at all enamored with the north side solution. It feels structured and urban, and I feel like I'm in Kenmore Square, or Ink Block or other places that have those kinds of things that you showed in your photograph, and not on a sort of semi-rural path around a pastoral pond. I understand it's a reservoir, but the reason people want to walk along it is because it's pretty. So I would like to see if there's some way to do more of the swale all the way around and less of the structure. At places like the photograph on the left, I wish the swale could be between the traffic and the pond, because I just think that would be a nicer divide and give you a little safety when you're on that paved path, that you're feeling a little separated from the car. I understand sometimes this path diverts from the pavement, but I think when it's right adjacent, I might try to acknowledge that and use that to good effect. I think that's the gist of my comments. In spirit, I support very much what Chelsea is asking, which, like, if there are ways to do this that feel less engineered and structured.
I will say we did look at several different alternatives, grassy swales, stone diaphragms, you know, rerouting it to like Jeffrey was saying earlier, to like a grassy area, like the triangle where the trees were, for several different reasons. None of those three really worked fully. You know, maybe we would, so with the grassy triangle, we might be able to get water there underground, but we would ruin mature trees. So you know, when we were looking at all the alternatives and trying to, if it was just to convey stormwater, it would be easier. If it was just to retain a asphalt sidewalk back from a grade change, it would be easy. But when you're trying to do both with such a narrow corridor, it becomes really challenging. And I agree with all of you guys that, you know, I think DCR, this is an our first preference. We would love to have been able to put like a grassy, more naturalized swale through here, but it became real challenging to design something like that.
So the south solution, I'm sorry, I don't have the nomenclature. One's a swale and what's the other one called?
They're both so that, well, the southern one is more a bioretention rain garden.
Okay.
And this is more of a bioretention swale, the northern one that we're talking about.
Is there a reason the rain garden can't be the solution for the whole thing?
Because the rain garden does not allow for the retention of the sidewalk, the grade separation that that we need to achieve here between the asphalt paved path and the gravel path. That's the challenge of trying to meet both of those criteria, trying to find a solution for both of those in this location, both the stormwater conveyance and the, you know, the retaining of the grade separation between the asphalt path and the gravel walkway.
Yeah, because in this view here, you know, to be able to get this slope to go towards Chestnut Hill driveway would require a major addition of fill and to get the
And I'm all for
grade
that.
going for that.
Having just walked around a bunch of capability brown gardens in England.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see people build whole hills.
Mm-hmm.
I understand we don't have that money.
Could I ask a couple questions here, Brad? This is Jeff
This is
Haney.
not my meeting, but yes.
Okay, all right. I used to live at Cleveland Circle like 35 years ago, and the public was not allowed to walk around a reservoir. Is that correct? Do you recall it all?
I cannot recall that, Jeffrey. I apologize.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, historically, what was here originally? But you know, I've walked around the Brookline Reservoir between Warren Street and Lee Street, and it's spectacular. There is no asphalt sidewalk. It's just the rotten rock or the stone dust, and it's graded with natural swales on either side. I think there's more area to play with that on the Brookline Reservoir, which we don't really have here. But I think that is the quintessential sort of goal of trying to achieve that.
Yeah, is the asphalt path necessary? Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm
should
saying. Get rid of it.
is that what you mean, Jeffrey? Like,
Yeah.
it feels like that. And again, like we'd have to look at the study report, but I don't think that's an original feature of this place. And I know people, I'm sure they love it. And
It may be an accessibility issue.
yeah.
I believe it is. It's part of the Chestnut Hill driveway roadway infrastructure that yeah, the removal of that sidewalk would take an act of Congress that I wouldn't want to fight.
Mm.
Especially given that the Boston College is right, you know, right there, and they utilize that thing on a daily basis.
I'm sure.
Commissioner Ward Hyatt, looks like you have some comments as well. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes. Well, my first question was going to be, do we need the asphalt as well? Why are there two paths side by side? I mean, I know that stone dust, as long as it's graded correctly, can meet meets ADA. So it might be good to just really understand what is at stake there if we, what's causing that to have to remain.
The asphalt sidewalk is not part of the reservoir. That's actually part of the roadway. It's a roadway feature. In this area right here where we're looking at it, it's part of the Chestnut Hill driveway roadway
But who owns that?
layout.
Is
Yeah,
that
what does that mean
DCR?
for us?
That's DCR. It's a DCR roadway.
And this is a DCR project, so we should be able to comment on that, right? Or no? Jeff, you chime in if like we're overstepping, but I really think that we should be looking at all options here.
It depends where the boundary is for the.
Yeah, that's true.
Or,
Right, yeah,
or does
I
it
don't
need to
know
be
the,
around the entire extent? I mean, maybe it's something that you need or that's associated with the road when it's adjacent to it, maybe.
yeah, I'm
but
not sure where
for-
the DCR control begins and ends along this stretch here, looking north, and what this connects to, if this connects to the neighborhood down here or what, but and we can certainly look into that that function
Might be
and
good
need
to
in
have
this area
a
to see if there's
plan
any.
that clearly defines what is DCR versus not. My other questions were, the swale along the north and the south which was identified with the yellow line on the aerials. So there's no connection between the asphalt path and the stone dust path along those stretches, right? There's no kind of outlet or connection. If you're on the asphalt path and you're like, oh, really, my ankles are killing me, I want to get to stone dust, you have to go all the way around? Or go through the swale, walk over the kind of
Oh,
thing?
and the proposed conditions, you're asking how one would do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
To my
Go ahead,
knowledge, there
Jeff.
are no
No.
breaks in this proposed because it needs to be continuous in order to provide the proper stormwater control.
That's correct. That yellow line that you're looking at there would be continuous, but then after that, the asphalt path continues out to down, parallel with Beacon Street. And there, the asphalt path and the stone dust path are, you can walk right off it onto the gravel if you wanted to.
Okay, well, I'm sure you're anticipating you're gonna have people jumping the curb to go float between one side and the other. And the plantings will have to manage that, I guess, just.
So what we've seen in this area is, just so everybody understands a little bit, the people that are walking on the asphalt path are coming from the college or from the fields that are across the street. And then they'll take the asphalt path and then turn down. There is no sidewalk on Beacon Street, so that's why there is actually an asphalt path in that area of the reservoir, around the reservoir, to accommodate the not having a sidewalk on Beacon Street. So people will continue to, so that asphalt path there is essentially really only there because there's no sidewalk up
On
where
the
the
street.
guy is on the street, exactly. So that's what that path is there for, to accommodate road traffic. And the people that walk around the reservoir, they're, typically like doing the loop themselves, you know what I mean? That's already
On the stone dust.
on the stone dust, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people.
I've walked around there a few times,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
just kind of getting back to some of Justine's questions, looking at the sections that you propose, like on page 6, I think. It would be helpful, so you have elevation 131.2 called out that you had mentioned. If you can go to page 6, which doesn't mean anything if this is a typical section, but having those, the vertical dimensions, I assume those are meant to be consistent. So you said, I think you said 14 inches on the
Somewhere
stone dust
thereabouts, correct.
side, and then 2 inches or so on the asphalt side. That would be good to label, I think, so we
Absolutely.
understand. I'm probably the only one on the commission that or in this group that I don't have a problem with the kind of the what I'm imagining is going to be the look of this. I think as long as the swale itself is lush and planted, I think it's going to be attractive. That 14 inches is really close to a seat wall height, and I think that actually could be a nice feature. The width of the curb, which also isn't labeled, which would be good to know, maybe wouldn't support a full, person's depth, but at least you could get
Now that's a 6-inch
cheek
curb,
on
but I
there.
get what you're saying.
Yeah, so I think that could be a nice feature. But having that information on the drawing, I think would help us understand. And then on page 12, I'm a little confused. So 12 is very different. So those are not curbs that are set flush with the stone dust. That's something else, a stone diaphragm. Is that like a little gabion?
That's it's a typical detail for paved and stone dust paths when they meet. Underneath the stone dust, there's a little layer of just like it's shown there, and it's a diaphragm about 12 inches by 12 inches deep with a perforated pipe, just to help with some stormwater. Every like 100 feet there would be a cross member pipe that goes under the paved sidewalk that connects to the rain garden on the other side of the paved sidewalk, just to kind of help. It's not 100% for the storm. It's just to help it so that we don't get consistent puddles up in between the asphalt and the gravel.
Okay.
So I think one of the see right there, it's a
this
slotted
one.
4-inch pipe. Yeah,
So
there you go.
it's gravel. It's just a coarser gravel.
Yes, exactly.
And it's kind of in some sort of zone. But it's odd to me that the paving is then kind of chamfered up, set above that. But
I think that's just that's just shown. It's really going to be flush with the
it
gravel.
would look better, I think, if it was flush. It would
Yeah,
just look
it
a little
is going to be.
quieter. Okay. All right.
I think it's just trying to show you what, the difference between the pavement and the, there's going to be a very minimal elevation change between the asphalt and the gravel path in this area.
Is any of these improvements do they include, or does the DCR own the benches that are scattered around?
It's all good. They're all getting replaced in kind, but yes, they're going to be refurbished or replaced in kind.
I mean, I thought that precedent photo that you showed in Roxbury was very attractive, and I guess I'm just wondering, can we have less modern metal furniture and more? I don't know. I kind of like what you created there with the stone, or someone created there with the stone bench, but or the kind of thickened stone edge that could be a seating place.
You mean in the depiction of what was done in Roxbury?
Yeah.
I would have to defer to you guys, actually. I mean, I think when we designed this, we just planned on changing the existing benches, park benches in kind, just getting them newer and they were older, and we were just going to replace them. But
yeah, the short cliff benches are kind of our standard bench design for these types of reservations.
I don't have a strong feeling about it. I thought it was attractive. So anyway, okay, I think that's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we're going to open it up to public comment.
I see a
Great.
hand. Ava?
I think I need to read into
Yep.
the record. Members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on the application discussed. To do so, please raise your hand in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at blc@boston.gov. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on the project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues related to use, street traffic, and noise are outside of the commission's purview. And with that, Ava, you could please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I have been a very activist for the Chestnut Hill Reservoir for 30 years. And I heard commissioners asking various questions about the history of the paved path and so on. I have answers to all those questions. We were involved in drafting the resource management plan for this location. And, you know, there have been improvements made in connection with the waterworks development, but now there is a need for more improvements, and we do appreciate DCR's taking initiative on fixing the issues that exist there. But I'm hoping that maybe the approval of this project could be postponed until DCR comes and meet with the Chestnut Hill Reservoir Conservancy, which is a officially incorporated nonprofit, and there are people there that are really deeply engaged in this location and love the reservoir and would like to provide public input to this. As for this, I know I only have 2 minutes, so I have to rush. The paved path was installed because there was great public demand for having a area where you could work in winter months. The DCR would not be able to shovel snow from the stone dust path, so we requested the paved path, and it's used very frequently by people with strollers or some elderly people who don't feel comfortable walking on the stone dust path. I also want to bring up to DCR's attention, because this is our opportunity, we don't really hear from them at all, that there are different types of stone dust, and some stone dust, maybe the cheaper variety, really turns literally into dust. And there are a lot of people there, including BC students and people who live in the area, who jog there. And in dry weather, we end up inhaling all this stone dust. So we would like to investigate, you know, the possibility of resurfacing this area with something that doesn't become dust, that then introduces silica particles into people's lungs. And one other thing, I was late to this presentation, so I apologize. I will reach out to Mr. Walton to ask for a copy of this presentation. But I noticed in one of the slides, it says that the stone path would be, stone dust path would be angled towards the reservoir, and the same goes for the paved path. And we believe that directing rain, the water going down into the reservoir takes the gravel with it into the reservoir, which ends up accumulating there. So that may not be the best solution, but we would be just very happy if we had an opportunity to discuss it with DCR staff that is in charge of this project, and then we can exchange opinions. And of course, DCR has the power of making the ultimate decisions, but at least they would have some input from us.
Miss Webster,
Thank you, Ava.
we are. Thank you. Over
Thank
to
you. That's it.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much for your comments. Any other public comment? I don't see any other hands raised. And just wondering if either the applicants would want to respond just quickly to the comment on pitching towards the reservoir. I don't think I noticed where
I
we
would
were
just-
pitching towards.
I would just say that the whole reason for this project is to pitch the everything away from the reservoir.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we can check that one off the box there, Ava. Great, excellent. Okay, and with that, I think we'll close public comment. And I am going to take a stab here at summarizing where we are at. I believe our recommendation at the business hearing would be for possibly a continuance. Does that sound right, Brad and Jeff and Angela?
Yes.
And just to kind of summarize, I think where we're at, folks, you know, correct me here as needed. But I think first and foremost, we do want to define DCR space in the surrounding area, and that might be available for assessment as part of this redesign. Taking another swing at finding on the northern plan a more natural, less structured, engineered application if possible. 3, honing in on final grading changes, enhancing proposed details with real intentional dimensions for both new and existing components. Also offering the stone dust specification, which I assume is a DCR standard. But if we can include that, and I think David would strike me down if I didn't also list planting selections as well, if those could be listed on the next round.
Okay.
And then finally, if we could just define any other landscape equipment or benches, any other components like that that are planned to be replaced as part of the project.
When you
What do we
say
think?
define, do you mean how many or what
I think
kinds?
if we
Or
could just on a plan, really like identify, you know, existing benches that are intended to be replaced, you know, in kind, to note as in kind, I think is fine.
absolutely, I thought that.
Any
no,
other structures like that? Trash cans? I'm always
So we
excited to
have
hear
a
trash can.
we have a detail on the plan set, sheet 3 of 4, page 18 of 21, that shows the bench that we're going to be. I mean, we could certainly provide more information if you want, but that's that shows the bench there.
We love more information if it's relevant. So I think if we can
Okay,
include it,
Yeah,
and
we
I
can
think
provide that.
yeah, I think the
Absolutely.
specific locations of existing to be replaced would be great.
Okay.
What do we think, team? Did I miss anything in that summary?
I think we might also recommend that DCR speak with the group that Ava was mentioning.
Sure.
Any civic group that has interest in this project, that's always something that we encourage.
We're actually planning a meeting.
Great.
Awesome.
If Ava or someone know, can you repeat the name of that group?
Chestnut Hill Conservancy.
Yes, the Chestnut Hill Conservancy.
Okay, and with that, I think we'll close this topic and move on to administrative review.
Great.
Okay. All right, I will now read in the administrative review items into the record. This is a little bit of a list, so here we go. Application 26.0864 BLC. Battery March Building, 89 Broad Street, expansion of previously approved scope of work to repair facade deficiencies to include the main facades of the building. Application 26.0814 BLC, the BOND-HAMPTON House, 88 Lambert Ave, Roxbury, removal of 2 trees, replacement of deteriorated wood siding and trim in kind, and replacement of entry steps and deck railings as previously approved in 2020. Application 26.0875 BLC, Boston City Hall, 1 City Hall Square, rooftop HVAC installation and related work previously approved in 2023. Application 26.0783, EFC, 15 Channel Center, Fort Point, installation of temporary signage at awning and entry doors to the Boston Lyric Opera. Application 26.0811, FPC, 15 Channel Center, Fort Point. At the front facade repair, At the front facade repair, dislodged masonry at parapet. Application 26.0785, SB, 11 Durham Street, replace existing windows with new. Application 26.0799, SB, 20 Folan Street, cut and repoint masonry joints to repair cracked and falling masonry. Application 26.0838, BLC, Franklin Park, Circuit Drive, restoration of Ellicott Arch. Work includes removal of vegetation, masonry repair and repainting interior, installation of security lighting and cameras, and repaving. Application 26.0802, BLC, 149 to 151 Pearl Street. At roof, replace existing antennas and telecommunication equipment. Application 26.0840, SB, 69 St. Botolph Street, cut and repoint masonry joints to repair cracked and falling masonry. And finally, application 26.0818, SB, 244 West Newton Street, emergency repair. Waterproof the walkways to address leak. Scrape, prime, and paint the stairs to match existing. All right. So do the members of the commission have any questions or comments? Joe, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we did receive written comment from Jennifer Heuring from 47 Rossmore Road regarding the restoration of the Ellicott Arch. She had concern in general about the proposed lighting and security cameras, which staff has determined is consistent with the standards and criteria found in the study report. So I have directed her to contact the Parks and Recreation Department to discuss her concerns.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. Any other members of the commission having questions or comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a recommendation for the motion to be made at the hearing.
I would move that the administrative review items be approved as recommended by staff at the full hearing.
Excellent. So we will do that. Thank you very much, Brad. And I think with that, that brings us to the end of our agenda for the design review.
Okay.
Great. Good job reading all of that, Justine. That was a lot. So we'll see everyone at 6.
Yep, we'll take a pause and we'll reconvene at 6 p.m. for the business hearing.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Scott Thompson, he's going to be presenting.
I think I need one more. I'm assuming Angela Ward Hyatt's coming.
I'll just give it another minute.
Yep.
For those of you who have joined us and are on the call, we are just waiting a couple more minutes to allow people to arrive. Brad, we just had Commissioner Amadeo, Commissioner Hoffman, and Commissioner Gagno just arrive.
We're good to go. I'm going to get started. Recording's on.
Recording is on.
Excuse me. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Brad Walker. I'm Chair of the Boston Landmarks Commission, calling to order this meeting of the Boston Landmarks Commission, April 28, 2026, at 6:06 p.m. With us this evening are Commissioners Jacques, Freeman, Orlando, Mac Jones, Hoffman, Gagno, Amadeo, Haney, and myself. Also with us are Boston Landmarks Commissioners staff members, who include Elizabeth Sherva, who is Deputy Director of the Office of Historic Preservation, Joe Cornish, who is Director of Design Review. Chelsea's here, I think.
Yep.
Excuse me. Chelsea Blanchard, who is Staff Architect. Did anyone join while I was looking down? We're all here. All right, thank you, everybody. You can participate in this hearing by going to the Zoom meeting link posted on our agenda online at www.zoom.gov.com/J/16074011753 or by calling 646-828-7666 and entering the meeting ID, which is 160-740-1753. You may also submit written comments to us this evening at blc@boston.gov. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, including the March 28, 2025 amendment extending the suspension of these provisions until June 30th, 2027, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Boston Landmarks Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. This hearing is being recorded. All conversations between commissioners should be audible to the public in attendance until the hearing has been adjourned. If there are any media or elected officials present, I would ask at this time, would you please identify yourself and state your name and affiliation? In order to be unmuted, you will have to use the Zoom platform raise your hand function. If you haven't been on Zoom in a little while, it's now under a heart, at least on my screen at the bottom. Or I think if you're on a phone, you press what, *9, *6, something. Give people a minute to find that. Seeing none, I'm going to start by summarizing tonight's published agenda. We're going to start with a review and ratification of the meeting minutes of April 16th. We then have design review items that were heard in the design review subcommittee meeting earlier this evening. If you happen to be here for the Loring Greenough House that was on the published agenda, that item has been pulled from the agenda. That will not be heard this evening. We will discuss some changes around the Chestnut Hill Reservoir, and then design review administrative reviews. Then in the full meeting, we have an advisory review for 50 Cedar Street in Roxbury, and that is our one agenda item, and then staff updates and adjournment. So we'll move on to the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes for April 14th were distributed to commission members earlier, and I welcome any comments or corrections to those meeting minutes. Actually, I want to make sure people got them.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Anyone have any corrections? Okay, I would accept a motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented.
I'll
Make that motion.
motion.
I'll second that, Brad.
All right.
Jeff Haney.
Jeff Haney, second. I think that was Justine Orlando.
Yes.
Primary. Thank you. All commissioners present would be voting. So Commissioner Jacques,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Orlando,
Yes.
Commissioner Mac Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Gagno,
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo.
Yes.
Thank you. And Commissioner Haney.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the meeting minutes are approved. And we're going to move on to the design review subcommittee recap and then ultimately the vote. And at this time, I would recommend design review subcommittee chair Justine Orlando to take us through those items.
Great. Thank you, Chair Walker. So the subcommittee met earlier today, summarizing the agenda items, and we will give a brief overview and then the design review subcommittee's recommendations. So our first and only application tonight was application 26.0829 BLC, which was the Chestnut Hill Reservoir and Pumping Stations in Brighton. So they did give us a nice presentation. It was for the proposed work to replace a portion of the existing Chestnut Hill Reservoir Trail and construct a new stormwater management, which features to improve the drainage, including a new bioretention swale and a bioretention rain garden. Overall, subcommittee was pretty happy with the bioretention swale that they were proposing, and had some questions and further detailing that we're looking for on the bioretention system. And that was on the northern half of their plan. So we'd like to make a motion for a continuance, or are we just recording that this would be a continuance? We vote on it.
Make a motion. Yep.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion for a continuance.
Jeff
on the
Haney makes that
application.
motion.
I'm going to take Justine as a motion, and Jeff, I'll take you as a second. Thank you.
Okay.
All commissioners voting, Commissioner Jacques,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Orlando,
Yes.
Commissioner Mac Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Gagno,
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo,
Yes.
Commissioner Haney,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Great. The design review subcommittee also read the administrative approval items into the record during the design review subcommittee meeting. So I'll also make a motion to approve all of the administrative items that are listed here.
I'll move to
you.
approve those.
I'm going to take Justine as the mover, and I'm sorry, who was seconding?
John,
John, don't lose your voice.
I know what little I have.
Commissioner Jacques,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Orlando,
Yes.
Commissioner Mac Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner Gagno,
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo,
Yes.
Commissioner Haney,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So now we move on to an advisory review for 50 Cedar Street in Roxbury. This is proposed work on the construction of a new building and installation of access ramps and entrances to the existing building. This is a City of Boston landmark building. And the applicant is here. Remind me who that is, please. Yep.
It's Scott Thompson. Thompson, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Scott, thank you. If you'll hang on just 1 second, before you begin, I'm going to ask someone from the staff side to read the staff comments and recommendations, which I think they've gone over with you previously. And then when you speak, you'll have an opportunity to address some of those if you'd like.
Okay, Brad, I'll do that if you can
Thank
hear me.
Yep.
Great. So this is application 260839. It's the St. James African Orthodox Church at 50 Cedar Street, Roxbury. Tonight we're going to be reviewing a presentation by Scott Thompson from Hassine Architects for a new building on the site of the church. So as quickly as I can get through the staff comments. The applicant's project description is the construction of a new building and the installation of access ramps and entrances at the existing building. Staff notes that adding a new building of this proposed scale and size to a location that has been open space for decades will have significant impact on the property and is of a concern. The site of the new building is reflective of the 19th century rural nature of this place, and adding a new building to the lot will change the setting of this property, which is part of the landmark designation. So in other words, some of our landmarks are just sort of the building footprint. This landmark includes the entire parcel. Please note that this is a designated Boston landmark, but it also sits within the Highland Park Architectural Conservation District. It is further subject to a preservation restriction donated by the City of Boston as a result of Community Preservation Act funding used by Historic Boston, Inc. to acquire the building in 2018. So there are a lot of preservation eyes on this building. For the purposes of this first advisory review, staff recommends that the commissioners focus on the following elements of the project and then invite the application to come for a second advisory review to discuss the finer details of the design. These categories are the siting of the new building, number 2, the scale, size, and massing, landscape alterations, number 3, and then sort of the general style of the building as well. The restoration work on the original church building was approved by this commission last year and is currently underway. The applicant should be applauded for this excellent preservation work. And that's in progress if you happen to drive by. I'll go through our staff comments on the new building, and then I'll let Scott take it away. In category 1, the current siting of the new building is intended to keep the mass of the new building away from the existing church. The team has pushed the building back on the lot as far as possible to preserve views of the church from Hawthorne Street, which this is on a corner of Cedar and Hawthorne. Hawthorne will be the main facade of the new house, of the new building. Unfortunately, this siting puts their parking lot in front of the new building and directly adjacent to the church. In an urban setting with typically short front yard setbacks, this is an uncomfortable dichotomy between the building and the building, street, and vehicle. Staff recommends studying schemes which place the parking behind the new building. This will maintain setbacks found in this area of Highland Park. Former designs for the proposed buildings at this site have shown a building that was placed up close to the street front, and felt much more natural as an urban design. The commission should evaluate both placement options to determine which is most compatible with the existing church site and neighborhood environment. Number 2, tonight we're going to be looking at a building that is partially a half basketball court. So the scale of the new half basketball court with offices below creates a very large and tall building on this site that, in staff's opinion, crowds the existing church and neighboring buildings. The commission should consider, does this building need to be this big? Are there other recreational basketball court designs that can be lower in height? Can the offices of this organization be elsewhere located on the site or in the building's design? Is there a need for a half court to follow regulation sizes, as they, from my limited knowledge, can't host official games on a half court? A shorter building would be preferable on this site and would be more sympathetic to the historic building. Number 3, landscape alterations are a concern and should be carefully reviewed here. The equipment box located next to the church should certainly be tucked away in a different location. The need for retaining walls needs to be examined carefully. The current lot is a gentle sloping grade up from Hawthorne Street, and staff suspects that there will be a lot of grading needed to accomplish this new building and may negatively affect the setting of the historic church. The general style, this is the last one. The general style of the new building is also of concern to BLC staff. The new building is a stark and utilitarian, reads as stark and utilitarian, and does not complement the church building from the street at the facade elevation facing Hawthorne Street. And I'm going to take a little liberty here. The use of this Scandinavian simple house form design gives the more interesting facade of the new building to Cedar Street instead of the main facade, which will, as I said, be on Hawthorne Street. The main facade thus reads as an afterthought and not as an intended design. A new modern building in this location, should it be allowed, should echo the design of the church in an interesting way. The current facade on Hawthorne Street reads as a nondescript outbuilding. If the BLC is to allow this new construction, it should be an appropriate design which complements the church building. I have also pulled out relevant study report sections. I hope commissioners got a chance to take a peek at them. If during our discussion tonight, anyone needs me to tell them what the study report says, I can certainly do that. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Chelsea, and staff for pulling it together. I would now recognize Jeff Thompson to present the work. Jeff, can you unmute yourself? Okay.
Scott is the name.
Scott Thompson.
Yep. Well, thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Chelsea, for the comments. And I must say at the start that, you know, although we've met with Chelsea and Joe several times over the last year and a half, these comments are come as, you know, not as a shock, but kind of, you know, surprising. I don't think we didn't receive them before we submitted, but so I guess at this point, should I share the presentation and just run through that and try to, okay.
Yep.
So.
You should be able to share, Scott.
Okay. So can we see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to make it full screen?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So here we are. Let me just minimize this. So I was going to give a presentation. I thought I would just run through it, and then I don't know if you want to stop me at different points and talk to the points that Chelsea mentioned, or do you want me to just give the whole presentation and then we'll talk later and go back to slides? What's the preference there?
You can go right ahead and do your full presentation, Scott.
Okay. So, you know, I'm
about 15 minutes, so we can have a conversation.
Okay, sure. Let me try to run through it really quickly. It's about 30 slides. So my name is Scott Thompson. I'm a principal at Hessine Architects and an architect there. We've been working on this project for several years, originally with HBI, and then they saved the building from sort of developer taking down the church, and then they subsequently sold it to our current developer, nonprofit developer, ROXBURY Action Program. So the program for the site is full rehabilitation of the church, the new annex building on the rear lot of the church. You know, I just want to mention that developer's nonprofit. They've been in the community for 50 years. This project would represent their sort of home base, their offices, and their spaces for their programming. All the uses are community-centered uses. It's a historic tax credit project for the church, and there's a phase strategy that we're looking at to help them manage fundraising and rollout of the project, although we want the whole thing approved at the same time. The site plan, I'm sure you're familiar with. It's a 19,000 square foot lot. There's the church on the corner of Cedar and Hawthorne Street. There's currently a parking lot on the site. There's currently a stone wall on Hawthorne Street, pudding stone wall. And then you can see with the contours, the slope up to the rear of the site. The abutter to the west and north is a large housing development, and it's a very landscaped sort of site back there. And that's sort of the site disposition. So as a diagram of that, this is the, you know, sort of the existing conditions. You could see the church, and then I've highlighted items that we're going to be talking about. The north, or just items to just orient you. There's north steps on the church, which we're going to be using as primary entries into the church. There's a monumental set of steps on the south side of the church on the corner. That was the traditional church entry. There's a small access door in the transept gable end here. The stone wall along Cedar Street. We're maintaining the vehicular and the pedestrian entries with the new design. And then, you know, some of the trees that are on the site, some of which have already been removed as part of the early phase of this building. So here's some site views. The top two, or the left two images, are sort of predated any work. You can see the asbestos shingles still on the church. You can see the stone wall along Hawthorne. The lower image is sort of a view in the site. Again, it's sort of very simple, sloping landscape, perimeter trees around the edges. The images on the right show some of the current work that's underway in the phase one sort of rehabilitation of the skin. The brown shingles, much of the shingles were protected by the asbestos siding, as luck would have it, because it was on the building probably longer than the shingles were originally exposed. Again, in some views of the wall there. Some other things of note, there's some trees that are going to be part of the, tree removal that are going to be part of this project along Hawthorne Street. Some were already removed and approved in phase one. This is on the north side of the church with the sort of tumbled down retaining wall that needs to be restored. Has already been removed. There's some images of the front stoop of the monumental stairs that go up to the former main entry of the church, and these are structurally unsound and to be rebuilt in the new work. So this is sort of the proposed master plan, if you will, and highlighting the work that we're seeking approval for. First of all, the church, adaptive reuse of the church and the continued work there. The new ADA ramp that we're proposing is a accessible entry to the sanctuary level of the church from Cedar Street, and this would be the main sort of entry to the church itself. We're rebuilding the monumental entry steps, and the reason why this is going to be the main entry is because the monumental entry steps aren't going to meet code for rise and run and for landing size and for door sizes and things. So we're keeping that as a historic part of the church. It could be used for ceremonies, it can be used as a door, but it won't be part of the egress or entry to the building. There's a new ADA ramp that we're proposing to tuck into the landscape on the south side of the church that would get you direct access to the lower level, which would be use that requires direct access from grade. I'll talk about that in a minute. On the rear lot of the building, of the site, the new annex building you can see here, and it has been pushed back, as Chelsea mentioned, but we read that as one of the requirements of the site easement on the site, this idea that you must maintain the view to the rear of the church along Hawthorne Street. And then the parking lot redesign is the other component of the site design here. We're arguing that historically this was a parking lot, and although we're expanding it, we're reusing that use, if you will. So the parking has sort of been a continued use on this site. The idea of pushing the building back is to sort of lower the scale and make it sort of more secondary to the church. And then, of course, the repair of the historic wall. So just quickly, the phases. This phase is already underway. This is what we're calling phase one. You can see the Landmarks Commission approval numbers. This included the tree removal, which is number one, the repair to the envelope, and number three, the reconstruction of some of these wooden stairs entries to the building. So that work is ongoing currently. So there's some images of that. You can see some views around the church, the main entry, redone canopy, a lot of the rework of the shingles and the restoration. The windows and doors are coming later, but these are some of the images of that. Phase two would be the sort of interior and the remainder of the exterior of the building. The ramps, as I mentioned before, the mechanical element that Chelsea mentioned is a pad-mounted transformer that we believe will need to be sited in a location that Eversource can access, and we can talk about the location of that too. So I just quickly to go through some of the improvements that we're proposing for the church. So the rebuilding of the monumental stairs, we're trying to recall the original steps that were there. So this historic photograph on the right was, I think, in 1912 or 15. It was very close after the construction of the church. So the design for that is going to be looking to sort of recall that scale and rise and run of the sort of railings, the side mounted stringers that hold the railings and things like that. Aerial view of the landscape on the Hawthorne side in the corner of the church to show how this ramp would work. So the uses of the church on the sanctuary level is going to be a multi-purpose kind of space that will also be used, could be used for assembly, for community gatherings and things like that. And there's also, the RAP has a mission to help augment the school, the Nathan Hale Elementary School, which is across the street, that currently doesn't have facilities. They don't have an auditorium, they don't have a gym. So this would act as sort of an auditorium kind of space for them too. On the lower level of the church will be an adult day health center, which will be another community use that would be operated by a partner of RAP. And that requires this sort of direct access from grade as part of the state requirements for that. There's a door that's existing in the transept apse of the church, and we're proposing to, restore that door to something, that is more sympathetic to the history of the building. This would also be an entry for staff to the Adult Day Health Center. On the north side,
may I just interrupt just
of
for
course.
a sec?
Sure.
Are the things that you're showing related to the church building, the steps, the ramp, the door, part of the previously approved package, and you're just demonstrating them, or are they coming back for new approval?
No,
These are
and
going to come back new approval.
yeah.
Okay,
I
thank you.
neglected to talk about these things. We've been working with this applicant on these items for quite a while.
All right.
And so
We're
my
looking
comments
at a
were,
new building and some changes.
and some new entrance ideas in order to facilitate the new uses.
All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. And also, like, the repair of the stained glass windows wasn't approved yet, and that's going to follow on. We're working with CPA funds right now for the skin replacement, which is really a repair permit with ISD. So all this future work will be like a full permit with ISD. So to the north side of the church, we have these reconstructed steps, and you can sort of see diagrammatically where Nathan Hale is. So, this ramp would provide this accessibility to the sanctuary level. We originally had a ramp that came up and then doubled back and hit the steps, but working with Chelsea and Joe, we were trying to sort of pull that deeper into the site and minimize the impact from the street. And you'll see that in one of the views later. So this shows sort of the phase 2 where we build the ramp to access the church, and then the next part, which we want approval for too, is the connector that would connect it to the upper level, the half court of the annex building, which was another goal of RAP, which was to get this sort of direct desire line for the kids to come from the school and access the site in sort of a very direct way from their path. And it also has the double use of keeping the kids sort of organized as they enter these facilities, so they're not just sort of coming onto the site and roaming the site. So there's going to be some control just by being on these access ramps to enter these program areas for them. So phase 3 would be obviously the annex building, the new renovation of the parking lot redesign, the wall repair, and then obviously the landscaping. You can see here we're going to try very hard to maintain a lot of the perimeter landscape that's on the direct abutter side on the west and the north. There's a large tree in the middle of the site that we want to maintain too. So that's something we're targeting as well. This again is just sort of an overview of the entire project and showing that desire line from the school and how they would connect to these different uses. And again, what I've already sort of described. So getting into some of the details of this phase, this is a sort of conceptual view of the parking area, which, as I said, it's currently a parking area. I know it's not in use right now, but it's because construction is going on. But we understand we're expanding it. We're going to be working with our landscape architect to further develop this and all the landscaping. But the landscape attitude, I mean, I know we're putting a building here. I know we're expanding this lot, but we're trying to, maintain the edges. the landscaping as much as possible, the landscaping along the street as well. You could see it's sort of ghosted in here, you know, to try to keep trees there, put in new plantings there. And then, you know, the site has ledge, and as it goes up the slope, you know, we're very mindful of not, you know, really digging into the site. So you'll see a site strategy section coming up. But again, there's probably challenges with the groundwater recharge on this site, and we're imagining that you know, we're going to need to have a structure that's below the parking garage or the parking lot here to manage that stormwater. And you know, we want to explore pervious paving as much as possible to help this sort of the groundwater recharge. You know, some of the ideas for the idea of how to deal with this annex was there's a historic map from 1915. So the church is here. You can sort of see this idea of there's outbuildings around the site. So that was one idea, that it was an outbuilding that was, you know, sort of in harmony with the church, but not trying to compete with the church or be something different than the church. And the other sort of architectural concept is the idea of a bank barn, a building that sort of nestles into a hill and has, you know, access from both levels onto the site. This diagram shows the concept section. So on the left would be Hawthorne Street. You can see the historic stone wall and the grade sort of sloping up and the bedrock notched in there. So conceptually, you know, the first base of the building would be this foundational element, which would be the offices for RAP. So the concept is like they're the foundation for the project. And then on top of this, we understand this space is large to accommodate this gymnasium, and we are trying to minimize, we have it down to its sort of minimum proportions. There's a height limit, obviously, for play, you know, and then there's, you know, length and width sizes for this half court. So we're trying to maintain that, but sort of minimize the impact of how it looks from the public way. You know, and then the last sort of element is this facade that's sort of draped over this component of the play, which represents the kids in the future, and this sort of facade represented the community sort of protecting them. This is some of the views of the elevation. So on the top is the view along Hawthorne Street, and you'll see in the 3D, the idea here is to sort of do sort of a contextual nod to the church to pick up some of the datums, so, you know, the roofing, the quality of the proportions of materials and things like that, to try to be sympathetic to the church, but not try to compete with it. On the lower view is the east facade, which would be the access point for the kids coming to access that gym. And you'll see that in the renderings as I go through too. The other elevation, so the top is the north elevation, which would face the rear of the site and into the wooded area of the abutter. Here we'd have clear story windows to sort of bring in indirect light and also have views from inside up into the tree canopy. The west elevation here, again, is sort of this revealing of this volume underneath. And this would face the abutter. And, you know, I have some 3D views of that coming up as well. For the materials, you know, we want to use high quality materials, but very durable materials. So right now we're thinking of metal cladding and like cement board siding type products on this, with a base of like clad in a stone that is, again, is sympathetic to the sort of quality of the church. These are some sections which show the volume, and this, again, as I said, this is sort of at the minimum for you know, this type of use. You could see how we're sort of, the RAP offices are a partial floor plan to sort of nestle it into the hill and reduce the impact in the site excavation, especially into the ledge. This is a view along Hawthorne Street. So, I mean, I heard Chelsea's comments and I kind of take issue with them a little bit. You know, we think that this is sort of a contextual sort of representation here for this project, which we thought was appropriate. We were, again, recessing the building into the site to reduce its apparent mass, which we think is successful, and also comply with the preservation easement on the site. So you could see we picked up some of the datum lines of the church, the stone base idea, this idea of this shingles, although we'd be using a different kind of siding, and then the slope roof. And again, but simpler volumes so that the church with its sort of intricate shapes and roofs is really the star here. And we maintain the view to the apse of the church along Hawthorne Street. And we're actually recessed into the site. You know, when you see another rendering of the west of Butter, those townhouses are also pushed into the site. You can see the stone wall in the front restored and, you know, sort of reusing the vehicular entry into the site itself. So now the last two views of the project, just to show you like the views along the street, sort of not the direct view from Hawthorne, but sort of pulled down the street. So here's a image. You know, you could see this is the direct abutter. I mean, it's not spectacular, but you know, it is a recessed building. You could see the mature trees that are along the fence line here. The fence around the west and the north is off of our property and maintained by this direct abutter. Some of the trees are also on their property and straddling the line. So we're trying to maintain these mature trees as much as possible. So this is a sort of the trees faded back view, and you could see the annex building here. You know, with the facade sort of wrapping over on the front, you know, that would be the view to Hawthorne Street, and then revealing the multi-purpose space on the side with some windows that will provide some light and interest inside. And obviously, we're hoping to maintain these trees, so that would help sort of, you know, shield this a little bit. And then another important view from Cedar Street, which is the sort of approach view for the kids to come to the project in both sort of venues. You could see here the mature tree that we're really going to try to save, the historic house that's about here, the church itself. And you can actually see here the townhouses on the lot, you know, down Hawthorne Street and how those sort of appear here. And we think that the reading of the annex is sort of a similar view down here. The building is shorter than the church and it's shorter than the house in the foreground as well, both in measurement terms and also in elevation terms, like the house is a taller building. So this would be the approach for the kids, and it would sort of reveal this, you know, facade of this gymnasium. You could see the ramps would be the sort of direct shot in to connect to that, and also connect you into the church. And of course, we're hoping to save this tree. So I hope that was 15 minutes, but that's the presentation, and I can go back to wherever we want to go back to and answer any questions.
I think that was just about 15 minutes. We're going to say it was. Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open the floor to Commissioner comments and questions. Someone just jump in, then we have a little
I'll
line. We can
start.
raise hands.
John Freeman, I'll start if nobody else wants to, but I will. So first, I want to say you've done an incredible amount of work, and I think this is a great presentation. And I also think the work that's going on in the building already is wonderful. Thank you for all your participation in that. I think you're and Chelsea, I wanted to say, Chelsea, you wrote the notes there. Did you nod? They're excellent.
Joe and I write them
It
together.
was a team effort.
The two of you are really good, and this is especially good set of notes. And I'm saying that partially because it was so clear that I could disagree with them, because I do disagree with one part of it. I think that Scott, your site analysis part, I'm not ready to get up on that yet. I do think you said somebody at one point said the church should be the star, and it absolutely should be. And when you see the pictures from Hawthorne Street of your renderings, the way it's set back, even if it's cars in the front, still makes the church the star. And so I'm not quite ready to give up on that. But I think it doesn't work, and I do agree with just about everything else in the commission, I mean, in the staff comments. Where I think the trouble comes around is in the knuckle that's, if we could go briefly back to the plan. And I'm trying to keep this broad level and high. I think your details and renderings are nice, but in the interest of time. Yeah, the knuckle, right where it says ramp connector and new ADA ramp, where the mature tree is. I'm sure one of or John Amadeo will comment on the ability to keep the trees. But in my experience, a lot of construction next to a tree like that, it's very, very, very hard to keep the tree. And I think that's the nexus of this site, because you have the entry coming in from Cedar Street. I'm sorry, I call it Peter Street. From Cedar Street, you have the connection to the RAB offices, you have the connection to the new building and the church. And filling that with a big aerial ramp really just doesn't suit that very important knuckle. If we can look at the picture of the ramp. Sorry to jump around.
You could sort of see it here too.
But yeah, but if we can look at that, I mean, you picked a great shot for my purposes. The one that, so you can see that the ramp comes down, and the image is taken as no. I'm sorry, the other. It's like
toward the beginning of your
yeah,
presentation.
much towards the beginning.
Okay. This one.
Exactly.
Yep.
And what it's creating is a dead man space under there. It's an important area because you have the entries and all the other connections, but under this ramp elevated like that is going to be like under the old artery. And I can think of 3 or 4 of these that were done with steel metal ramps 10, 15 years ago that just turn into trash bins. So what I'm going to suggest is that you forget the tree, give up on it. And John, you can disagree with me, but I think it's too important here to make a physical built connection from the new annex building to this building. I see that or it didn't look like you have an elevator or a vertical access in the new building, and I'm not
we
sure.
do.
Oh, you do?
We do.
Oh,
Yes.
excellent. Okay. So even better. I don't know where it is, but if you can make that elevator serve the church, the RAB offices, and the annex building all at once with this in this knuckle, I think that'll solve a lot of your problems.
Yeah, John, this is exactly what we had asked of the applicant during the time that we discussed all this ramp area. And I think, Scott, if you want to explain why the client didn't want to do those things, I think that would be helpful.
Right. I think before, Chelsea, we were talking about like a architectural connector between the buildings with some shared core. And I think that's the part that just didn't work for the project. So, but I get, John's point. I mean, if we had, so you're talking about keep the knuckle, lose the ramp from Cedar Street in this view, keep the knuckle connection to the annex, and have accessible needed people enter through the annex to get into the sanctuary. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, or something like that.
Some combo.
Whether it's
I think that's possible. Yeah. Well, there's absolutely on the core where that knuckle hits the annex, it's hitting the elevator core. So that's a secure space where you could enter at grade on site, go up to this level, exit, get into the church without sort of being in the gym, without being in the RAP offices. So I think that could work, actually.
Perfect. You're going to hear a lot of other opinions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
No, but John, you hit right on something that Steph had asked for in the beginning, and it was sort of, I think it was dismissed by the
client.
By the client.
I think we still have some issues there because I think Chelsea, that original ramp we had was ramping up to the sanctuary, and now we have some steps, even like from the annex just to get down here. So right now, currently, this connection wasn't even accessible to the annex. So it was the church primary access here. Yeah.
It's a complicated little corner, and I feel like we've been trying not to build a building for a
think you have to.
long
I think
time,
the
but I think we have to. Yeah, I
I
agree.
think the
John.
site is telling you that this is where it needs to be. It'll
Yeah.
open up this whole side. It will make it a much more pleasant entry from Cedar Street. And I think in doing this, you can probably save some room in the annex building and maybe even push it back a little further. And Chelsea, in your note, and Joe, in your notes, you're right for the proposed scheme. But if that can be done, if this can be done, if we can make use of that knuckle and make a connection to the church,
Right.
then I think I vote for this site scheme.
Parking in front, building.
The parking in front.
Yeah.
I mean, they're starting to do some really nice landscape things to sort of mitigate the parking. And, you have to have parking somewhere. And right now, the HP ramp that goes down on the Hawthorne side of the building, I think fits very nicely.
Mhm.
But somebody right now, the path into the sanctuary, I'm not sure how they get there from the parking lot. I'm sure there's something worked out that I haven't caught, but I do think
You
that.
want to go to your rendering on Hawthorne Street for a minute, Scott? Because I think that.
But that's outside of our
the
purview
plan.
anyway. I'm saying that, I think that this is what this, in my opinion, is the whole site is focused on this knuckle, and you have to build it.
Right, but would like I'm trying not to attach the buildings with architecturally.
I think you
I
can.
think you have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the standards and criteria say about that, but that's why we have a commission.
Okay.
I think it's demonstrating to us that you need to attach them, in my opinion.
Okay.
In terms of the design, I think there are things about the design that I like and some that I don't. I think there's not quite enough similarity to the existing building and picking up on details to make it really work. And as much as I like your sort of odd Scandinavian asymmetric storefront, it doesn't, that's a modern Scandinavian element, and it's not really what's.
So could you
connected
just
to
clarify what's Scandinavian here?
Well, I thought you said that. Somebody said.
No,
this
I think
house
Chelsea
is-
mentioned that. Yeah.
So when you're
okay.
on the other facade, on your Cedar Street facade, that's sort of like
Right.
simple house, peaked house that's all
Yep,
one.
yep.
I call that like a Scandinavian house form.
Oh, okay. So you're the.
And
right.
that it's simply because I look at house too much.
Yeah, I always thought of this as like, from the elementary school kids' perception, this is kind of, it looks like a child's drawing of a house,
Yes,
so it'd be
yeah.
some kind of memorable, moment for them. But
It's very cool. I love the look of it. I'm not sure right next to the church that it fully works for me. It may be that it just needs some more detail or some more three-dimensional, dimensionality that exists in the facade of the church, or or it might be that it's not the right place for the asymmetry, but that's something you can work out that, as you develop the design. It's something that's catching my eye. I actually like this view because I do agree that it really draws you down there. So if we do build out that corner, I would keep the elements that draw you down to it. But anyway, I should let other people make comments, obviously.
Angela, you have had your hand up for a bit.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Angela, do you want to go ahead? Or we'll let someone else go and we'll come back to you.
There, I just couldn't, get my video and audio. I can't get my video to work. It's disabled by the host, so I switched from a phone to my laptop. So my video is still not set up. I don't think I'm a co-host yet.
You are now, Angela.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. I'll let someone else go while I gather my thoughts. Thanks.
Brad, Chelsea, this is John. I can't find the raise hand command on my screen. So can I just go?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I apologize for my laryngitis. It's probably more painful for you to hear than it is for me to speak. Anyway,
We want to
apologies
hear
for
you.
that. And I have a lot to say, which is a shame that I can't speak. But since John invoked my name several times, I feel compelled to say a few things about the trees. The trees are really part of the character of the site. You know, the knuckle is an important part of the site too. If a tree has to be lost to create what needs to happen there, the compensation is going to need to be significant. The city of Boston has a tree ordinance requirement that you are going to have to meet here. For, you know, you have to replace every caliper inch lost with new caliper inch. So, you know, bear that in mind as you circle trees for demolition. Particularly mature trees with large trunks.
Would it be helpful to go to the site plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the survey would be.
And I will say, John and I often agree on a lot of things. And curiously enough, we agree here as well. My first question when I was reading your comments, your staff comments, which are fantastic, some of the best you've written. But the whole idea of the view corridor to the rear of the church and bringing the new building to the front of the site on Hawthorne Street seemed to be at odds with each other as a recommendation. And I couldn't figure out how you could achieve both. I think I agree with John that maybe the site plan is the best way to accomplish this program, the current site plan. I don't love visible parking from the street, but John mentioned that there are some proposed mitigations. And I agree that if those mitigations are implemented, it might take the curse off the parking a bit. But that puts a lot of responsibility on the applicant to make sure that that mitigation happens, and also that we hold their feet to the fire, and that grass pavers are not replaced with asphalt in the 11th hour. That would be a crime. So, you know, that, you know, there's responsibility on both sides to make this work. And, you know, I will have my eye on this. So you can be sure our responsibility will be met. But when it comes to the building itself, and, you know, the knuckle, I agree with John's comments about the ramp underbelly becoming a no man's land. And it'll be a shame because you can see it as you come and go from the entrances to the church and the annex. You'll be able to see what's going on under there, whether it's good or bad, and mostly it's going to be bad. So you're going to have to find a way to mitigate that. The trees that you're showing overlapping the building are going to die. So you may as well show them gone, because you cannot build a building within 5 feet of a mature tree and hold on to that tree. I can tell you, I've tried. It's virtually impossible. And I don't know that you can bring an arborist onto the project that can promise you that those trees can be saved. But you can do your best to save them. But I'm, you know, you kept saying, we hope to save this tree.
Yep.
That didn't give me a lot of confidence. So the next thing I want to say is about the building massing. I find the building massing a bit disturbing. Of course, it's a box because it's a gymnasium, but there's got to be something better facing Hawthorne Street than that minimalist facade. The minimalist, you know, Scott, everything you said in your presentation were the right words, but I kept trying to match your words to what I was looking at, and there was a disconnect. You kept saying we want to let the church shine. We don't want to pull focus. And I keep saying to myself, the new building is pulling focus, probably because of its minimalism. It is so blank. that I'm looking at it and saying, why? I also find the proportions unsettling. The slope of the roof is too shallow. The proportion of the upper floor to the lower floor seems unsettling. The placement of the windows is not sensitive to the fenestration in the church. I mean, it's just one thing after another. There seems to be not enough attention going on this elevation. Maybe the elevation needs to be broken up in its massing. Maybe a recess or a protrusion or something that actually breaks up the single, plane that's going on there. But I think the slope of the roof is probably what's disturbing me the most, because it's a contemporary roof slope next to a historic building, so close. And I heard somebody say that maybe the buildings need to be attached. And if the buildings are attached, there's even more responsibility to find ways to be contextual while maintaining your contemporary integrity. And it's been done. We've seen it done over and over again successfully. So I think it can be done here, but it's not being done yet. I'd also like to look at the Cedar Street facade. But before you do, can you go to the site plan again?
Sure.
I understand the gesture of angling the wall of the main entrance to the annex.
Yep.
But I find it exceptionally disturbing that it's not parallel to the church. It's like 2 degrees off. And I
It's meant to line up with the church, but yeah, okay.
But it's not. My eye tells me it's not.
Okay.
And it looked intentional not to be. And so I feel compelled to say it must be if you're going to do it.
No, it will be. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And I also think that wall needs to be longer, meaning it needs to join the orthogonal part of the annex farther north, so that you have a little bit more wall that's parallel to the church, because it just looks too short. It looks like you just took the end of the building and broke it. It doesn't look intentional enough. Maybe going as far as where the corner of the property turns, the inside corner of the property.
Yep.
With
Here.
that 12-foot 2-inch. Like if you connected there, it would feel like you really meant to break that facade. And it just doesn't look intentional enough at the moment. And I agree with John that now can you go to the Cedar Street elevation, please? I agree with John that this is probably the best elevation. And I'm not disturbed by the height of the building from here. I feel like it's recessive enough from the church or the house next to the church. But I do find the asymmetry off-putting, because it's pulling my focus from the church. And also maybe the very brightness of the facade material. And I know you want to be able to pull people back there, but the way it's being done is saying we're more important than the church. And if the school is the main user of this building, they know where this building is. Nobody's going to be hunting around for the building if you make that facade darker. So I think you need to consider not making it as focus pulling as it currently is. I like that you want to be playful with the entrance and make the entrance something to want to be walking toward. And I think there are elements of what you've done that you should keep, but I think you need to be more in sync with the church itself. And having said all of that, and I know that was a lot with my hoarse voice, I will cede the microphone.
Thank you for the comments.
Sure thing.
Angela, should we jump back to you now that you have your
Sure. Thank you.
camera? You're all ready?
Yes, thank you. I agree with a lot what the other commissioners have said. I also would support a physical connection as opposed to this kind of what feels like a little bit of a temporary solution for the ramps. But agree that it needs to be, well resolved, and hopefully, in a way that's connecting, very low on the building composition. I agree with the comments about I like this view. I see what you're doing here. The asymmetry is putting me off as well. I would much rather see kind of just a simple gable that draws you in, that respects the gables of this composition, and maybe instead of a window opening that has a big solid down the middle of it, maybe it's kind of pulling in from the tripartite window. It's broken into 3 pieces or something that just feels a little bit more welcoming, and more kind of picking up selectively picking up clues from the church architecture. I definitely don't think this you need to be referential down to the details of this church, but there's so many fun and interesting things to pick up on. So that would be my recommendation on this view. And on the Hawthorne Street, maybe this is your intention, but I agree that the window size seems a little small to me.
Yep.
I don't mind the simple facade. I get it, but I think larger windows that would be more in the scale of the windows, maybe 50% larger than this or so,
Sure.
would work well. And I see what you're kind of doing with the datum of the building material versus the base. And I'm just wondering if the base, obviously you're not going to build it out of Roxbury pudding stone, but if it could, be darker to kind of, create that datum through the whole side. I think, as much as possible, I would encourage you to think of this as, a composition. And really, this building it's, part of I get it. The program is also for the school, but this really it's on the church property. And I think its first allegiance should be to that. And then, just thinking color-wise, the view from Cedar Street, just, I'm sure the renderings that you're showing of the church is meant to show the final colors, the proposed colors. And I was just wondering if this addition could be kind of an inverse of that, where you kind of use the dark as you were doing here for the trim work, and roof, but the body of the building could be that beautiful
That
kind
sort
of
of cream color. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
But
kind
I
of
think
the
just
idea,
something.
but yeah. Yep.
Okay, well, rather than the yellow, but
Yeah.
I just think something that I think something a little quieter
A little
could
subtler than this.
could go a long way. But I totally, and then I would encourage maybe looking at a row of columnar trees along Hawthorne, to separate behind the stone wall, to separate the parking from the street.
Okay, thanks for those comments.
Jeff Gagno.
Yeah, 2 quick things on this elevation. What is the variety and health of the specimen tree that we're talking about here?
I apologize, I don't have that information. I thought it was like a chestnut tree or something.
Well, without its leaves, it looked like
yeah.
an ash, and if it is, that's
Yeah.
probably not long for this world anyway. But I'm just curious about that.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Maybe it's an oak. Okay. And then I'm going to be the one who sticks up for the asymmetrical gable, because if you go back one slide, there's a sea of gables here, right? There's the two street-facing gables on the church and on the house next door. Then there's side-facing gables that lead you down that alley toward the back of the building. And I actually like the fact that you look toward the back of the lot, which is quite a ways away, and you see something different because it draws your eye to it. And I also don't have a problem with the contrasting color to also perform that same function of drawing you back there, because it's a ways back. And it's a little bit flatter in this rendering where it seems like it's closer to the street, but it's a ways back. So I'm going to stick up for the asymmetry and the contrasting color. And if that tree is, depending on what the variety and health is, if it needs to go to accommodate the kind of infrastructural needs and is replaced in kind as appropriate and is required, then so be it.
Thank you.
Brad, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by this facade too, and I'm not actually sure from the sort of elevations and plan that have a number of sort of chamfers and bends in them, if I'm looking at a gable or if the sort of dark brown roof behind the tree is actually coplanar with the yellow wall behind it. Is that roof or wall?
It's wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
I'm
trying
not
to play
gonna
games here to break down that volume, basically. Yeah.
I would love it when you come back to see more, I guess, just sort of sketch up views of the building itself to help explain its geometry, as well as some of the more developed details that I'm sure are coming and that you're thinking about. I actually am going to vote on the side of really liking the Hawthorne Street elevation. I do agree it needs more work, but I like its simplicity. Your firm is well known for detailing textured facades in historic contexts that make them interesting, and I'm assuming you're going to keep doing that. So I would just like to better understand the roof geometry and the wall geometry as I'm looking at things, because I don't think this is actually a gable in the end. It's sort of a drawing of a gable. It's a drawing of an asymmetrical gable on a shed roof form. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. I definitely, I'm in general agreement with other comments about the sort of elevated ramp, and it sort of looks temporary. In that one view you had too, it leaves you with this very sort of unpleasant looking triangular space in plan between the ramp and the fence of the abutters. So not only are there sort of weird things happening under it, but next to it.
Yeah, the weird fence line though is on our property. The abutter has for years enjoyed sort of a backyard onto our site. And if we restricted them to their property, they'd sort of lose that. So the client is trying to be a little bit generous here and give them some form of yard to maintain there. So that fence would enclose that. But point
Okay.
taken. Thank you.
Be generous to the architecture too.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm going to leave it at that.
Justine, I see your hand up.
Hey, Scott. My comments should be pretty brief here. When you do get back to the subcommittee design review, could you please, and kind of what Brad was saying, just add some more details about what's happening with the fence? I don't really quite understand what's happening in the renderings. And I think if what John Amadeo was saying, if some more of these trees may have to come down, if we could really understand the perimeter fence on the back end of the lot as well, that would be very helpful.
Scott, would you flip to a site plan just so we can look at that?
Sure.
I'm
Sorry.
on page 16 of 33, if that's helpful.
I don't think the page numbers are going to show up on this view, but
Sure. I was just looking at the rendering of the gym. Yeah, I guess this is fine. So it looks like in the renderings, there's a fence line that comes off Hawthorne Street and then like wraps all the way around to the
Yep,
fence line
here.
that Brad was just talking about.
Yep. It actually stops in the back here, the chain link.
Okay, I think in the
Actually,
renderings,
yeah, if I show you this, hang on. You could see the fence here off the property, then it comes up and it turns up here. So that's the
okay,
existing fence, and you can see some of the trees that are on our property, and there's more sort of on the abutting property.
gotcha. So on the renderings, it makes it seem like that's more of a solid fence, especially, uh, um,
Yeah, I think there's some fencing around the townhouse units that are abutting. Let me just go to the end here.
well, I think it would be great to understand that a little bit better of either what's there or what you intend to do. I do think it, again, kind of looking at the renderings that you have here, it it starts to translate with the size of the new building. So if we could get some clarity there, especially if more of those trees are coming down.
Sure.
I mean, I guess, are you planning on doing anything more than the chain links that's there?
Well, the chain link's not our fence. It's the abutting. It's on their
Gotcha.
property. It's off of our property. It's maintained by them.
Okay, so the one that you're showing on the renderings, is that a new fence coming in?
I think I think that might be a mistake if we're showing a fence on that side. I'm just trying to get to the right view here.
Hawthorne elevation.
Yeah, like this view. No, that doesn't show it.
No, I'm on like literally smack dab in the middle of the presentation.
It could have been the aerial, this one.
Oh, that.
No.
Yes.
Right there.
Okay. Well, this is the site property here, and then this is the abutting building, and they have the fences are shown
Okay.
in here. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
You might want to add a solid fence on your side.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Well, I think that the townhouses currently have privacy fences in for their yards, their individual yards, I think. But that's a good point. If, just a privacy fence would be good.
So also with that said, I guess I was maybe envisioning the height of the building maybe slightly less, thinking that there was a relationship to a fence there. Do we need all that height?
For the use, we kind of do, and it's already lower than, we're trying to tune the size of the court to like a high school kind of volume, which it's sort of at now, basically. And it's below the zoning height. It's below the height of the church, and as I said, it's below the house that abuts us as well.
But it's,
So,
I have to jump in here. It's
Yep.
still a very large building on a site that is open right now. So I think you have to deal a little bit more frankly with possibly some reduction in that.
Could there be like a lower, like the sort of shed portion of the roof, which is meant to sort of appear like it's a gable from this side? Could it be a solution where there's the sort of that piece of building that is described by that sloped roof? Maybe that's a lower volume on the front of this building, and then in the back it continues up to enclose the gym. I mean, something like that could work and still
Maybe.
maintain
I just also want to make sure that we have to deal with what we have, right? And that is, we have an open site right now, and we're proposing a quite large building. Is there any compromise in the height of that gym space? When you showed the sections, I mean, I watch my kids play sports all the time in various buildings in Boston. I don't think have experienced.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
we live in
we
the
can
city.
push it down, I think, then
Yeah.
if that's the real deal breaker here. I think, we were trying to maintain sort of a regulation size space, just
Yeah.
in case it needs to perform that use, but it is an elementary school.
Yeah.
It's not a space for competition. So I think we can make a move on that, Chelsea.
I think that what I think would be exciting about that is that then your volume can change a little bit. Like your building can become a bit more interesting if you're not trying to like deal with this massive scale. And I know
Right.
we can't like totally take the curse off of a gym, but we can. I mean, we
Yeah.
can try. And
Yeah.
I think one thing that I don't know if it was John Freeman or John Amadeo said that like, and I know some commissioners disagree, but I think there could be something much more interesting happening on this facade, and the roof is the beginning of that, I think. So
I think the other thing I want to mention too is that, our firm does do a lot of, high-end contextual work and in a modern way, which is true. And this project, I think there's a challenge of the budgetary challenges that we don't normally have in, when working in the Back Bay or, when it's some townhouse or some historic
sure.
building there. So I think we're trying to be mindful of that and have what I know there's pushback on the volume and the sort of the simplicity of this box, but that was part of it too, to try to maybe, I know it's a big building, but we believe, like at the street level view and the public way, when it's pushed back, it appears smaller. I know we're playing tricks here, but like the simplicity too was trying to maintain sort of budgetary requirements too. But that said, I think much more work can be done to sort of get it more in line. Like some of you mentioned about breaking this facade up, and my mind went to like if we're going to have this knuckle piece, and the chamfered edge, maybe that chamfered edge breaks off and there's a crank, where the entry is
Exactly.
shown on this building.
Yeah.
It would be this piece that turns to engage the church, and that would help just break up this facade, coupled with maybe lowering the frontispiece of the building to
Yeah.
be this sort of thing that's up, in front of what would be a larger volume in the back, that might,
Yeah.
go a
It'd be
long way as
interesting.
well.
I mean, you're precedent here. You're the
Yeah,
church.
Chelsea,
has
Chelsea, there are
something.
some commissioners that still want to comment, so let's make sure they can.
Oh, sorry. Here's Lindsay.
Yeah.
Lindsay has her hand up.
Yeah, I just out of interest, I have a little bit of laryngitis too, so did you look at all at switching the offices and the gym? Like a design where the gym, that whole gym volume could be sunken down to the lower level and then fitting the offices in a more interesting sectional way to sort of break up the volume of the building?
Well, I think the game we were playing with the section here, I think that, to lower, like right now, the gym is set at a walkout point where as the building's pushed into the site, the elevation grows. So that sort of set the elevation of that floor. So to keep the building recessed into the site and, have this gym be lower would mean, a much deeper excavation into the site in the rear and sort of burying the building into the site, which can be done, but we thought that would be much more consequential for groundwater and landscaping than what we're doing. We're trying to, I know it's a large building, but the use is sort of dictating that. But we were trying to do a more, if you will, a lighter touch on how the foundations are engaging with the landscape. So, I mean, I guess you could see what would happen if you did that. You'd probably have the same height on the front of the building if the offices were above. Um, I guess we didn't really study that because of the excavation challenges and the cost of that. So
I see. Are the kids coming in on the high side of that elevation as well
they
in the
were coming
sectional
in direct in that knuckle ramp situation, which we're talking about. So now I think there might be like, if the knuckle idea pans out, there might be some, landscape entry point from Cedar where maybe they go down some steps to get to that entry point, and then on Hawthorne Street, accessibility needs would be met there to enter into the knuckle and bring you up to both the second story of the annex and the second story of the church.
Thanks.
I'm going to pause at this moment if I can and open this up to public comment because we do need to do that. Let me just read this into the record. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you press *9. That's what I couldn't figure out before. To raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at blc@boston.gov. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person and should be focused on the project's exterior architectural features, which include landscaping. Issues relative to use, street traffic, and noise are outside the Commission's purview. I see James Rice. Can we unmute James?
James, you should be unmuted.
Yes, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I just want to thank Mr. Thompson for a great presentation. My name is James Rice, and I live at 54 Cedar Street, which is the house on the right shown in the current slide there. The Gothic Revival is shown there on the right. I'm also a trustee of the HOA in that building. And I think this was a great presentation. I appreciate all the comments. I simply want to say that the tree that's shown here, the large mature tree that's shown in the middle of this slide, our understanding is that that is a mature red oak tree. And it is our understanding that the tree bisects the property line. So I simply ask the commission to keep that in mind, that our understanding is that the tree is partially on both sides of the property, or half on our property, half on the church's property. And I just respectfully ask that the commission keep that in mind. And I do appreciate that Mr. Thompson has kept that in mind.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public want to say something? Anyone else from the commission want to say something without revisiting things we've already said? I'm worried that we've given this applicant too much to chew on because it's a big group.
I have one quick comment.
Sure.
On the east and west facades, can the basketball court area really have a chamfered roof or a hip roof to try to cut down on the volume of this thing a little bit?
We could study that, yeah.
So I do like the gable end on Hawthorne Street, and I wonder if that stays as a gable, but the rest of the balance of it angles back.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, I'm going to close public comment. I'm going to close commissioner comment. So as a reminder, this is an advisory review. Thank you very much, Scott, for your patience in getting lots of input, not always consistently, but that's the way that goes. And I'm sure you'll be in discussion with staff about how to proceed to next steps. No vote on tonight's matter.
Could I ask when the transcript or recording of this will be available so we can get all this advice down?
It'll be posted to our website by Friday.
Okay, great.
At the latest. It'll probably go up before that.
Okay.
And Joe and I will help you strategize if you should come back for another advisory review, if you feel like you have enough and you want to go straight to design review. So we'll help you with that.
We'll help you distill everything you heard tonight too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I imagine we'll have some desk crits up to, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chelsea and Joe, what will be the role of the ACD in this?
No, everything
Going
goes to
forward?
BLC.
Everything will move through BLC on this project? Okay.
Yes, yep.
And we have met with the community and the Highland Park neighbors who are in support of the project. And the client is in contact with the Friends of Nathan Hale School, which is a parent, neighborhood group that helps support that function. So, they're excited about the programming here too. I just want to mention that.
Okay, thanks, everybody. I'm going to move on to staff and commissioner updates and recognize Elizabeth Sherba to take us through staff updates.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Quickly, our next Boston Landmarks Commission hearing will be Tuesday, May 12th at 6 p.m. On that evening agenda so far, which will be posted on Friday, we will be looking at the study report for 33 Cordis Street in Charlestown, which is also known as the Swallow Mansion. The Bussey House is officially a landmark. I just wanted to let you all know about that and be aware of that. Jennifer Gogler and I presented the Copley Plaza study report to the City Council Planning, Development, and Transportation Committee last Tuesday, a week ago. And the City Council will be voting on the Copley Plaza study report during their meeting tomorrow. And we will keep you updated as items move through the different votes and recordings. That's all I have for this evening, Chair Walker.
I just want to note that since I last took attendance, Commissioner Ward Hyatt joined the meeting, which I think we all know, and Kathy Cottery is also here, Director of the Office of Historic, what is it called? Preservation, Historic Preservation. Other commissioners have anything on their minds? Okay, I would love to hear a motion to adjourn. John Freeman, you're unmuted.
I'll make that motion.
To adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, John. Sorry, who else spoke up there?
That was me, Angela.
Angela, thank you. Voice vote, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. Thank you, John Amadeo. You're a
Yeah.
trooper.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Night.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Yep.